Hey guys, Steve here at SKS Props. Today I'm going to show you how to make some super simple prosthetics out of foam clay. Welcome to the shop. Have you guys ever had a cosplayer costume that you wanted to take to a convention or a Ren fair that required some kind of a prosthetic? Something like bolts coming out of your neck or small horns coming out of your head, and you were unsure how to do that? I want to show you a super simple way using foam clay. Foam clay is lightweight, it's non-toxic, and it's really easy to work with. Now in this video, I want to go over some of the different techniques that I use, some of those being sculpting. I also use foam clay in a push mold. In either instance, you want to make sure once the foam clay is done being manipulated that you let it set for 24 to 48 hours. What that will do is allow the moisture to start to wick out of it and it will start to set up. You can then also use a rotary tool to add additional details to it. From that point, it's just applying some acrylic paint, attaching it to your prop or costume, or in our case, using it as a prosthetic. I want to show you guys the steps that it takes to do this. We got a lot to do, so let's get started. The thing you'll notice with my foam clay is that it is double sealed, first in the tub and second within the plastic bag. This will make sure that the moisture remains locked in. Once you pull out a bit, you'll notice that it has a slightly damp feeling to it and it's extremely malleable. It can easily be rolled or squished to just about any starting shape you'd want. It is an air dry material, so after about a month, the sculpture will become rock hard. I'm going to be using silicone tip sculpting tools, a little bit of water, and a tongue depressor to manipulate the foam clay. In the beginning, if you add too much water, foam clay can be a little sticky, so I like to use parchment paper to protect my surface. I add a little bit of water to the foam clay to help lubricate the surface, and then just like with normal clay, I use my hands to get a rough shape for the sculpt. In this case, I'm making a horn. Another way you can move the material around is to wet a tongue depressor and use that to flatten the surface out. Once you have your base shape, you can add some additional water. This will help smooth out any creases or wrinkles. I want to add some striations to the horn, so I pick up and use a wedged silicone tip tool. I make sure to wet this before I apply it to the surface. When using a sculpting tool, you want to press harder than you think because the foam will have a tendency to bounce back. Repeating the process I'd already done, I start to sculpt the second horn to match the first. Next up, I want to show you guys how to use foam clay in a push mold, so I have some basic bolts and horns made out of some Mold Star silicone. When pressing foam clay into a mold, I like to rip off and add a little bit at a time rather than all at once. This will minimize the amount of air bubbles that get trapped in the mold. This is a little bit more tricky to do with the horns because the cavity is pretty deep, so I'm pressing it in several times to force out any air that might be trapped in the mold. And because foam clay will shrink about 10%, I make sure to overfill my mold so that way I can trim off any excess. Once the molds have been filled, into the freezer they go for a couple of hours. Next up, I have two small horns that I had sculpted over a month ago, so they are rock hard. I'm going to show you how to add fresh foam clay to them to sculpt additional details. I want to add a little skin detail to the bottom of this horn, so I use an X-Acto knife to cut out the size that I need. It is important to wet the surface and then wrap the fresh foam clay around the horn. Then using a cone silicone tip tool that has been dipped in water, I can add an additional fold to the foam clay. This process is then repeated for the other horn, and an X-Acto knife is used to cut off the excess material on the bottom. After a couple of hours, I retrieve the silicone molds from the freezer. Freezing the molds helps the foam clay set up, so demolding them won't deform them. The bolts came out great, and I carefully extract the horns from the other mold. You can see that the clay picked up on all the details that were in there. I let all the pieces set for 24 hours. This will allow the moisture to wick out and the foam clay to skin over. At this point, the pieces have started to set up, but they still have some give to them. I especially like these little horns because you can see where the new foam clay has completely adhered to the old foam clay. To prep these for proper costume use, the bottoms are not completely flat, so we're going to go ahead and sand them. Now, foam clay sands extremely well, and you should be able to do almost everything you need with just a sanding sponge. If I wanted to take away more material or add additional details, I can do that with a rotary tool. Now, the particulates are very fine, so make sure that you're wearing a respirator and you have your safety glasses. Using the very edge of a medium grit sanding drum, I'm going to add some additional lines into the horn. Now remember, the middle of this material is still curing, so if you wanted to sand in deeper, you would have to let it dry longer. Smoothing of the surface and flattening of the bottom are done with a sanding sponge, but you can definitely see the difference that a rotary tool makes. This same process was done to the bolts to remove the excess material that was left at the top of the push mold. The horns that came out of the push mold were extremely detailed, and I want to keep that look, so I switch over to a stone bit to add really fine striation lines. And the same process is applied to the little horns that are completely cured. I'm going to do a quick painting demo for the horns that I'm going to use for prosthetics, so in this case I'm starting off using Utrecht brand Raw Sienna. This is generously applied to the push mold horns using a filbert brush, making sure to get down into all the cracks and crevices. After that had dried, I mixed in a little bit of the Liquitex Heavy Body Unbleached Titanium into the Raw Sienna and dry brushed that over the highlights of the surface. As a final pass, I used pure unbleached titanium at the very top of the horn. To attach the horns to my daughter's head, I'm going to be using Prozade, which is kind of like contact cement for prosthetics. You want to apply it to the subject and to the piece, let both sides of it dry, and then firmly press them together. First off, clean the surface with alcohol, and then apply 2 thin coats of the Prozade. I line the horns up symmetrically, then use a little bit more alcohol to remove the excess Prozade, and there you go, foam clay prosthetic horns. So you guys can see the basic steps that it takes to use foam clay to make some super simple prosthetics. Now hopefully this is an informative video for you and you can use these techniques to make some awesome modifications to your props and costumes. Now if you guys are enjoying these videos, be sure to give them a thumbs up and share them with your friends and family. And if you're building any of my builds or using any of my products, be sure to tag me and Blick on Twitter and Instagram because we love seeing your progress. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and until next time, thanks for stopping by.